Right, I reckon we'll begin.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, she's
We're
working.
working. 1, 2, 2, 2.
Right, hello. You can all hear me anyway, can't you?
Yeah.
Sam, I'll pretend I'm using the mic for a bit. My voice is big and loud enough. Right, thank you all for coming. Welcome, and those on Facebook as well. My name's Daniel Dakin, and for the past 2 years I've been finding the best way to alienate myself is by finding out the truth and telling it to people. And I'm doing been doing a pretty good job of that so far. But on my travels as well, while I've been doing this and while I've been finding out certain things, I've been meeting up and finding like-minded people that seem to uncover the same evidence. Oh, thank you. Seem to be uncovering the same evidence and finding the same things wrong with society. Now, one of the groups I've come across is Lawful Rebellion, which has a group number of 12,500 members now. So it's quite a sizable group to say how much it's not known. And I'm the beeston representative, I suppose. I've got the leader of our group, or the, so to speak, leader of our group. Don't really like to use that term because we're all sovereign in this, and that's the point of it. Yeah. But I've got David Robinson here, who heads up our group, has been pioneering our movement to kind of change things and bring back our constitutional laws. Myself, I'm going to give you a more generalised picture of it. I am me and Gordon over here. Gordon's ex-RAF engineer, who's spent the last 9 or 10 years? 16 years, last 16 years uncovering all kinds of corruption and presenting his evidence to all kinds of authorities, and he'll tell you more about that as it goes on. Gordon and me I've classed as the problem, and David is going to be the solution when we finally get to that. So I'll crack on and I'll start traumatising you all with the truth. I'm going to play you a short video now, just to get you started. And this is just something, I'll explain why I'm playing this video to you after I've played the clip. It's a short clip, it's 3 minutes long. To this image for a bit. Right, I'll do a little bit on this anyway. Does anyone know? Has anyone any idea what this image is about? Or have seen a part of this image before? You recognise it? No, at all. Okay. This is a part of the problem that we've got, which is conflict of interests. Now, this is a very short caption. You can see the companies involved are all well-known companies from all over the place, and you've got the dark, shadowy man there in the corner who's looking a bit ominous. Well, this picture belongs to this wonderful group here. And that's the real scale of the problem, because this group is the Bilderberg Group, and this is a union of businessmen, bankers, politicians, accountants, all high figures of our society that join together at least once a year to discuss how we should go forward in the social world on the bigger scale of things. Now, these people class themselves as the elite, as the more responsible ones out of us all, that are there to kind of to guide us in humanity the best way they see fit. Now, if that was the case, fair enough, we do kind of need some kind of guidance in society, which generally is, it's good for us. But when you add that into the mix and you put all these companies involved, then this person here adding his decision in and adding his 2 pence in is going to be thinking about several hundred companies. And maybe the person next to him is his good friend from another business, which he's also going to protect. So you can see where the conflict of interest lies. Now, the Bilderberg Group then filter they'll have a good discussion on how to go forward, like I've said, and that information will then be passed on to the EU. Now, that will be passed down through the EU through implementations which are something called common purpose, which is one of the worst cases. Common purpose, we've got, there's a link here, you'll probably find somewhere on here, Deutsche Bank. Now Deutsche Bank are one of the main contributors to Common Purpose. They're one of the main funders. And Common Purpose's interest is to infiltrate through schools, businesses, every part of society. They've taken, I think, 10,000 members out of all parts of society, trained them up in Common Purpose and how that can bring around a one world society, so to speak. It's about becoming integrated with Europe and certain other things. Now they've took those people out of their business classes, trained them up in the way they want them to train them, and then they send them back out there to the schools, to the businesses and everywhere else to then infiltrate that information and get it sent through the system, and then comes through to us in various ways. So there's one of my main bugbears with conflicts of interest. Obviously also I will add that we've got our own groups like this. We've got the Club of Rome as well, which is a similar kind of group. Tony Blair's well involved in that, and many other politicians. The Club of Rome is a similar thing. They'll meet, it's an advisory body, and also other than the Club of Rome, you've also got the Fabian Society. I don't know if you've heard of the Fabian Society at all. They're
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, well, the whole of Tony Blair's cabinet was in the Fabian Society, were members of the Fabian Society. When he was in power. Now, the thing about the Fabian Society is, and I shall demonstrate it to you now, when I find the right quote. I'll pop this up for now, till I find it. Now this here, that's the symbol for the Fabian Society. That's their plaque. Or it's their old plaque because they've changed it now. Now that is, you might not be, it's not the best of drawings. My daughter could draw better than that, but it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that's their emblem. That's what they use to present themselves and their image they want to present. Fabian Society, the word Fabian Society comes from the old emperor Fabio, or Fabio, depending on how you want to pronounce it. He was renowned for using infiltration and slow changes to change a society from the inside out, to basically infiltrate it from the bottom and just make a really gradual change into the system until it is in their image. Sorry, not joke for, until it's in their image, along with so there you go, there's the definition of Fabian Society, or the word Fabian, where it comes from. General Fabius used carefully planning strategies to slowly wear down his enemy over an extended period of time. I hope that you can see some similarities in today's society, where we're slowly being worn down and things are slowly being degraded. Our services, for one, National Health Service, you can see it slowly being chipped away at. Our police service slowly being chipped away at, and to the point where they're going to be, they're not going to function right, and they're not going to be able to function right through underfunding, just general lack of care, and wanting to kind of destroy them and turn them into a private company to then be earned off, which Gordon will tell you, most of them are private companies already.
Oh, yes.
It's a lot of what I'm saying has been done. But the way some of us see it through rose-tinted glasses, we're not quite there yet. But as people have found out, we are, unfortunately. So I'm going to try and load this video up for you. If not, I will have to cut straight to Gordon, and then Gordon will get on with his bit. Because I was hoping these videos would work. I wanted to try and get through to you how every part of our structure of our life has been infiltrated and been changed for the worse.
Story of the long railroad. I haven't seen that story in a while. Rockefeller and Stephen Oil. The
what I'll do with this is,
Dan, I could hear it.
I'm
Could hear it.
for this, what can you good enough for? Because I think what we'll do for your lot's benefit as well, if you can kind of, you'll probably be able to see it and hear it better. So we try. Because it's quite important information I want to show you. If not, I'll give you a quick brief description from my own head.
The House of Saud and the oil wars in the Middle East. Other parts are more obscure.
Can everyone kind of see that?
Oil in the outbreak of World War I. The petrochemical interests behind modern medicine. The big oil money behind the Green Revolution and the Gene Revolution. But that story, properly told, begins somewhere unexpected. Not in Pennsylvania with the first commercial drilling operation in the first oil boom, but in the rural backwoods of early 19th century New York State. And it doesn't start with crude oil or its derivatives, but a different product altogether. Snake oil. Dr. Bill Livingston, celebrated cancer specialist, was the very image of the trifling snake oil salesman. He was neither a doctor nor a cancer specialist. His real name was not even Livingston. More to the point, the rock oil tonic he pawned was a useless mixture of laxative and petroleum, and had no effect whatsoever on the cancer of the poor townsfolk he conned into buying it. He lived the life of a vagabond, always on the run from the last group of people he had fooled, engaged in ever more outrageous deceptions to make sure that the past wouldn't catch up with him. He abandoned his first wife and their 6 children to start a bigamous marriage in Canada, at the same time as he fathered 2 more children by a 3rd woman. He adopted the name Livingston after he was indicted for raping a girl in Cayuga in 1849. When he wasn't running away from them or disappearing for years at a time, he would teach his children the tricks of his treacherous trade. He once bragged of his parenting technique. I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make them sharp. A towering man of over 6 feet and with natural good looks that he used to his advantage, he went by Big Bill. Others, less generously, called him Devil Bill. But his real name was William Avery Rockefeller, and it was his son, John D. Rockefeller, who would go on to found the Standard Oil monopoly and become the world's first billionaire. The world we live in today is the world created in Devil Bill's image. It's a world founded on treachery, deceit, and the naivety of a public that has never wised up to the parlor tricks that the Rockefellers and their ilk have been using to shape the world for the past century and a half. This is the story of the oiligarchy.
Okay. Sorry about the format it's had to be on. I hope you kind of got the gist of that and could hear it well. The reason for showing you that video is 2 reasons. One, I want to introduce you to obviously the first billionaire, first American billionaire, J.D. Rockefeller. I think that's kind of a big turning point in life, whereas he's kind of, he's turned capitalism or just kind of profit as a first kind of concern rather than customers and customer care and all the rest. It's for his own gain. So you've got your first billionaire there who's kind of set the standard for everyone else and set the benchmark then for the rest to follow in, which has kind of happened. The second reason I've showed you that is because if you noticed, Devil Bill, as he was called, was a bit of a kid. When he was more of a kid, he was horrendous by the sound of it. He was raping, he was having bigamous marriages. He just literally had no care for anyone. Now, someone with no care for anyone and no concern and no conscience is a psychopath. Is the definition of it. So it's quite, it's not a far stretch of the imagination to say that Devil Bill would probably come under the requirements of a psychopath if you were to kind of assess him, because the things that he did to get where he got were unscrupulous. So there's the second reason for showing you, because I believe that in our society and the way we are and the way it's set up, psychopaths are they're at an advantage to climb to the top if they are unchallenged, which a lot of the time they will be unchallenged. Oh, unless you get the speakers through to the projector, can you? Spot on. So yeah, I just want to illustrate that the very first billionaire was probably the product, or the, well yeah, was probably the product of a psychopath, and therefore maybe a psychopath himself, if not at least a sociopath, to get where he's got to be. So we've gone on from there, and then corporations, obviously, to keep up with J.D. Rockefeller, have had to do pretty much the same, work in the same vein. I'm going to show you another clip, and for this one I'll have a bit of sound.
As gas shortages dripped.
However, know that the crisis and its ensuing response was in fact prepared months ahead of time at a secret meeting in Sweden in 1973. The meeting was the annual gathering of the Bilderberg Group, a secretive cabal formed by Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands in 1954. The Dutch royal family not only gave its royal imprint to Royal Dutch Petroleum, they are still rumored to be, along with the Rothschilds, one of the largest shareholders in Royal Dutch Shell, from the days when Queen Wilhelmina's Anglo-Dutch petroleum holdings and other investments made her the world's first female billionaire, right through to today. Bernhard's guest list at the Bilderberg Group reflected his position in the oiligarchy. Alongside him at the Swedish conference were David Rockefeller of the Standard Oil dynasty and his protege Henry Kissinger, Baron Edmund de Rothschild, E.G. Collado, the vice president of Exxon, Sir Dennis Greenhill, director of British Petroleum, and Gerrit A. Wagner, president of Bernhard's own Royal Dutch Shell. At the meeting in Sweden, held 5 months before the oil crisis began, the oligarchs and their political and business allies were planning their response to a monetary crisis that threatened the world dominance of the US dollar. Under the Bretton Woods system,
So okay, we've gone over that previously. Obviously, I was expecting to do the Bilderberg pictures and everything after this bit, but this is just to back up what I was saying. You can see where the Bilderberg Group came from and what it was initially intended for. They try to kind of palm it off now and say that it's an innocent kind of a group that joined together just to discuss innocent projects. I'm not convinced myself. They've had to come out of hiding because of the pressure from people like me and you that have been asking questions recently. I'm going to take you to now to the takeover of our medicine, our medical industry, and this is where it starts getting a little bit more out of the money realm and going into control of people and our society and how it's been changed from under our noses. Just got to find the right part of the clip. Just bear with me 1 second.
Committees, it was a tough sell. The oligarchy went to work changing that. In 1901, John Dee established the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. The institute recruited Simon Flexner, a pathology professor at the University of Pennsylvania, to serve as its director. His brother, Abraham, was an educator who was contracted by the Carnegie Foundation to write a report on the state of the American medical education system. His study, the Flexner Report, along with the hundreds of millions of dollars that the Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundations were to shower on medical research in the coming years, resulted in a sweeping overhaul of the American medical system. Naturopathic and homeopathic medicine, medical care focused on unpatentable, unmarketable natural remedies and cures, was now dismissed as quackery. Only drug-based allopathic medicine requiring expensive medical procedures and lengthy hospital stays was to be taken seriously.
The fortunes of Carnegie, Morgan, and Rockefeller financed surgery, radiation, and synthetic drugs. They were to become the economic foundations of the new medical economy.
The takeover of the medical industry was accomplished by the takeover of the medical schools. Well, the people that we're talking about, Rockefeller and Carnegie in particular, came to the picture and said, we will put up money. They offered tremendous amounts of money to the schools that would agree to cooperate with them. The donors said to the schools, we're giving you all this money. Now, would it be too much to ask if we could put some of our people on your board of directors to see that our money is being spent wisely? Almost overnight, all of the major universities received large grants from these sources and also accepted 1, 2, or 3 of these people that I mentioned on their board of directors, and the schools literally were taken over by the financial interests that put up the money. Now, what happened as a result of that is that the schools did receive an infusion of money. They were able to build new buildings. They were able to add expensive equipment to their laboratories. They were able to hire top-notch teachers. But at the same time as doing that, they skewed the whole thing in the direction of pharmaceutical drugs. That was the efficiency in philanthropy. The doctors from that point forward in history would be taught pharmaceutical drugs. All of the great teaching institutions in America were captured by the pharmaceutical interests in this fashion. And it's amazing how little money it really took to do it.
Okay, right, so that's our medical profession, and that gives you a little bit of a description, well, a little bit of a look into how our kind of infrastructures are infiltrated from the ground up, and then changed that way through the funding of what is the oil industry for their own gains. Now, when you obviously when you look at our medical profession and how that kind of interweaves into our life through vaccinations, flu jabs and things like that you're offered, and this, that and the other. When you bear in mind that it's a business, and it's a shareholder's business, it's run for profit, and the whole lot of it is run for profit, then you've got to start asking questions about what you're given, what advice you're given, and where that advice has come from, and where these advisory bodies are that are supporting this kind of medical structure. Because homeopathic medicines have been they're proven to work on some kind of scale. Not looked into this into a massive way, but as far as I can find out, a homeopathic way seems to be have a lot less side effects and a lot less costly, whereas modern medicine seems to be full of side effects, full of costs, and full of extra costs and extra add-ons through the side effects and the other stuff that might come off that and going down that route. It seems to be a very profit-driven way of getting better and looking after people. Now, I will take you now to the food industry, because we've gone, I mean, that's the brief description about part of the American medical system has been infiltrated by big business. Obviously, we've got our own system, but I think we'd be naive to think that isn't happening over here. And I think with the privatisation of NHS going on, you can see why and the reasons why they'd want to do that, because the profit involved in a business like this.
The oligarchy birthed entire medical industries from their own research centers and then sold their own products from their own petrochemical companies as the cure. It was Frank Howard, a Standard Oil of New Jersey executive, who would go on to persuade Alfred Sloan and Charles Kettering to donate their fortunes to the cancer center that would then bear their name, run by Hank, director of National City Bank. Meanwhile, John Dee's own grandson, David Rockefeller, built empire. In this move, the Rockefeller story perfectly mirrored that of their fellow oligarchs, the Rothschilds. Whereas the Rothschilds had supplemented their banking fortune with their oil interests, the Rockefellers supplemented their oil fortune with banking interests. Springboarding from success to success as they consolidated monopolies across every field of human activity, the oligarchs' ambitions became even larger. This time, their goal was to consolidate control over the very food supply of the world itself. And once again, they would use philanthropy as the cover for their business takeover.
The Green Revolution began in 1943 when plant geneticist Norman Borlaug and a team of researchers arrived on Mexican soil. His goal was to improve agricultural techniques and biotechnological methodologies, which in turn would help alleviate starvation and improve the living quality of developing nations. Creating new genetically modified strains of wheat, rice, maize, and other crops, Borlaug planned to win the battle against world hunger. The hope was that these new crops and farming techniques would rescue third world countries from the brink of starvation. That's exactly what happened. The agricultural innovations brought to the poverty-stricken countries gave the farmers the skills and resources necessary to sustain themselves. This triggered a chain of events that would allow these once struggling nations to survive. Agricultural exports soared in quantity and diversity and allowed the countries to become self-sufficient. As the genetically modified crops thrived, farmers were able to use their increased income to purchase newer and superior farming machinery. This increase in revenue made farming easier, more reliable, and more efficient. The Green Revolution led to the modernization of agriculture and has had a profound social, economic, and political impact on the world. The Mexican government turned to the Rockefeller Foundation in their endeavor to nourish Mexico through agriculture.
Norman Borlaug, needless to say, was a researcher for the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Green Revolution, for whatever increase in yields it brought about, also created markets for the oligarchs' own interest in the petrochemical fertilizer industry and gave rise to the ABCD seed cartel of Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus. These companies, along with their associated interests in the food packaging and processing industry, formed the core of American agribusiness, a concept developed at Harvard Business School in the 1950s with the help of research conducted by Vasily Leontief for the Rockefeller Foundation. The American agribusiness giants shared a common goal: the transformation of third world agriculture into a captive market for their goods. From this perspective, the project was a runaway success. By the 1970s, the Rockefeller Standard Oil Network and its cronies in the nitrogen fertilizer industry, including DuPont, Dow Chemical, and Hercules Powder, had broken into markets around the world, markets conveniently forced open for them by the U.S. government itself under President Johnson's Food for Peace program, which mandated the use of petrochemical-dependent agricultural technologies by aid recipients. Unable to afford these new technologies themselves, the impoverished Third World beneficiaries of this revolution relied on loans from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, handled by Rockefeller's own Chase Manhattan Bank and guaranteed by the U.S. government.
Lovely, eh? How nice. So you can see how an idea that is portrayed to the public as being an honest thing for humanity to help out these poor people that need food that will grow. And that's the idea that is put to us as the common man. So we join in and we say, yes, go for it. You know, go on, Mr. President, go and write that check, send them all that genetically modified food that requires the oil business as fertiliser, etc., 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 tied up with all sorts of conflicts of interest yet again. And then, obviously, the winners of it all are Chase, Money, World Bank, and putting another country into poverty again for a long, long time that they probably will never get out of. It just locks them into another system. I want to take a moment as well to mention, obviously, we've got our food industry. Now, there's big problems with our food industry, with it being such a profit-driven business, because they want to cut costs at every opportunity. I mean, to compete nowadays, you've got to cut your costs down to a level that is just is pretty much dangerous now. I've been doing some research into it, and one of the alarming things is it's an estrogen that's found in plastic packaging, tins, generally in a lot of food products. It's heavily soaked up by dairy products inside packaging as well. It's used to line the packaging, I assume, to preserve it somehow. Now, one of these estrogens is called bisphenol A, and bisphenol A, they've been finding out through certain studies recently that it changes your sex. It does stuff to your DNA, and they've been finding now And obviously there is a separation between humans and the animals that I'm going to mention, but you've got to bear in mind that this is recent studies and it's becoming more prevalent. But they've now found fish, turtles, crocodiles, snakes, I can't remember the other one, but they're finding them with all sorts of reproductive problems. Crocodiles' willies growing like pig's tails, so they can't have sex anymore. They're changing and they're having both reproductive organs inside them. So the actual population is then devastated through what they're soaking up through the atmosphere, because they're getting it from our water supply. That estrogen is in our water supply. It's a common fact that that if you do tests on our water, it's full of all sorts of horrible products, which we'll go into later. But also bisphenol A, you'll find out is in white fillings as well. Now bisphenol A is obviously it's not good for your body. They know it's not. You wouldn't be prescribed it in any other way. Well, they put it in white fillings, and they've recently found out that white fillings and your saliva around that is absorbing bisphenol A at a ridiculous rate, which then goes on to cause various problems. But they're putting that in your tooth fillings for your kids and yourself and everything. But they won't tell you that. You'll never know until you actually go searching for the information. That's all there is on that. Right, I'm just going to show you a last clip. Well, there's 2 more clips to go. There's one. This is one, unfortunately, when it gets a little bit more personal. And if you've got kids or grandkids and they're at school, then this one might bug you a little bit, because it did me when I first heard this.
Century still prized education and intellectual pursuits, with the 1840 census finding unsurprisingly that the United States, a nation that had been mobilized by tracts like Thomas Paine's remarkably popular Common Sense, was a nation of readers, with a remarkable 93% to 100% literacy rate. Before the first compulsory schooling laws in Massachusetts in 1852, education was private and decentralized, and as a result classical education, including study of Greek and Latin and a solid grounding in history and science, was widespread. But a nation of individuals who could think for themselves was anathema to the monopolists. The oligarchs needed a mass of obedient workers, an entire class of people whose intellect was developed just enough to prepare them for lives of drudgery in a factory. Into the midst stepped John D. Rockefeller with his first great act of public charity, the establishment of the University of Chicago. He was aided in this task by Frederick Taylor Gates, a Baptist minister that Rockefeller befriended in 1889, and who would go on to be John D.'s most trusted philanthropic advisor. Gates would go on to write a short tract, The Country School of Tomorrow, that laid out the Rockefeller plan for education. In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present educational conventions fade from our minds, and, unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers, or men of learning or science. We are not to raise up from among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply.
Lovely. Have you ever heard that statement before? You never heard that, no. Neither me until I first heard it, and I was took back by that. And you can see the same names popping up again, the Rockefellers, all the rest of it, you know, the big oligarchs, the big money men that are now infiltrating the education system. That comment disgusts me, but it makes total sense. If you put yourself in their shoes, then that makes total sense. If you want to control a society and you've already got what you need, as in the experts in that society, and you want to keep control of who becomes experts in that society, then it's a fantastic way of doing it. And then you separate that into private schools and you start bringing in levels of education that people can access or can't access. I mean, that's the thing. It's not what we can access nowadays. It's what we can't realistically access. And unfortunately, when my daughter asked me about schooling and what's the difference between private schooling, why private schools are better, and this, that, and the other, you just look at what they teach you in private schools, and then you look at what that's just said there about what we used to be taught: Latin, law, you know, important subjects that they're important because they tie in with the way our law was made, and it's written in Latin. So that's why they needed to learn Latin, to understand law. It all ties in. It wasn't just a language like we learn now, you know, learn Spanish just because you might go there one day on a holiday. They were learning a language to learn the laws and the customs and the ways to act in their society. That was then obviously taken away, separated into private schooling, whereas we see what kind of schooling we get now for the public. You know, you can't berate the teachers, and I'm not going at any of the teachers or any of these authority bodies that I go at, including the police, NHS, schooling, all of it. I come at it from a position of I'm not blaming the people that are generally running the business, you know, the policemen on the streets and all that, because they're just being underfunded. They're having the legs sliced off from underneath them, and they're being infiltrated by groups like this, where the money talks, and if you don't go along with it, you get capped, and you're off, and you're out the team. There's an IPCC scientist, the IPCC, I think it is. Might have added one too many C's there. They're an advisory body on the environment, climate control especially. Now they had a scientist there, Julie, I can't remember her second name, Julie Connors, I think, something like that. She was an IPCC scientist for a long time until she started going into the evidence that they were putting into their computers. Because what you've got nowadays, you've got a supercomputer which you will put data into, and it will work out predictive kind of scenarios that are going to come up with climate. Now, depending on what data you put into that computer, determines what comes out of it. So if you're putting falsified data into a computer, you're going to get falsified conclusions from it, which is what this lady found out. Now, as soon as she started finding this out and whistleblowing on it, she got sacked from the IPCC, all her funding got cut, and she was replaced by someone a bit more pliable to what they wanted to be put out there. The guy that's the head of the IPCC now, who heads up the research to it, has got a special arrangement with the British government not to disclose any of his evidence, and he refuses to disclose it to the public as well. And he doesn't have to, and our government protect that as well. And they use him as a reference point to get data about our environment and climate change. So you can see, again, who is he, why is he not releasing his data, and do we really need, is that a good system to have? You know, you, like I say, you be the judge, because to me, that's madness. Now, on the last clip I'm going to show you is, unfortunately, their kind of end game, and where it all seems to be going now. Now, I just need to find this clip, because that, in fact, I do know where that is. And then you've got to have a break and a fag after this, and then Gordon's going to traumatise you some more, with a bit more, because obviously I know this is all American-based, but this is mainly from one of the sites that I use, called Corbett Report. Now, he's an independent reporter who's listener funded. I donate to him. I give him, I think it's $1 a month. He's a guy he's a reporter that lives in Japan. He's got a Canadian and English parents, but he's gone over there to live, and he now runs what's called the Corbett Report. He also does university lectures all over the country. He's a fantastic guy, but the way he bases his information and his the news that he gives you, he's got a kind of a law unto himself where he's got to be documented. He's got to be able to prove it to you. So anything that you go on and have a look at on the Corbett Report, you will have all his sources there, and you'll be able to look up every bit of data and make your own mind up to whether he's talking rubbish or not. Just show you this last clip to what we're heading into. This one is it's hard to believe sometimes. But if you look into things like the Georgia Stones, have you ever heard of the Georgia Stones?
The Georgia Guidestones.
The Georgia Guidestones, tablets put up in America. I can't think of the state that they're put up. Idaho, and these tablets on them, it's almost a guideline for humanity after a world war, after an apocalypse. So when the remaining people turn up to these plimps and they see a guideline of what's the optimum population, which is the main point to these guidestones. It says on it, I'm paraphrasing, but optimum population is 500 million people. Now, what's the population of the planet at the moment? A hell of a lot more into it. Apparently, to get down to the ideal figure of 500 million, it's a 95% reduction in humanity. So to get to a sustainable amount of people in their eyes, 95% of us have got to go. Otherwise, we'll eat the world to death, and we'll use up all the space, and we'll burn all its resources out, and we'll kill ourselves. So to save ourselves, the elite have decided they're going to kill a few of us, and then just keep the rest on. And just to prove this,
Sounds like a good day out.
it does, doesn't it? Yeah. It's, maybe they'll hold a raffle to see who gets picked, but I don't think so.
Bomb man. Stay there.
Although Rockefeller's resources weren't exactly limitless, they might as well have been. In 1902, he established the General Education Board to help implement Gates's vision. From cutthroat pioneers of the early oil industry to Machiavellian social engineers and geopolitical schemers, the oligarchs have come a long way since the days of Devil Bill's snake oil cure-alls. But his use of every form of deception and trickery to swindle the public informed how John D. and the rest of the oligarchs built up their business interests. As the 20th century drew to a close, it was obvious that for the powerful cartel that built the oil industry, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the British and Dutch royal families, it was no longer about oil, if it ever really was. The takeover of education, of medicine, of the monetary system, of the food supply itself, showed that the aim was much greater than a mere oil monopoly. It was the quest to monopolize all aspects of life, to erect the perfect system of control over every aspect of society, every sector from which any threat of competition to their power could emerge. They had been remarkably, almost unbelievably successful. From oil well to gas pump, farm to fork, hospital to pharmaceutical, drill rig to dollar bill, there was almost no aspect of society that was not under their control. But the oligarchs are not done yet. Their next project, launched in the late 20th century, is almost too ambitious to be comprehended. It is not about oil. It is not about money. It is about the monopolization of life itself. They have spent decades preparing the path for this takeover and marshaled their mind-boggling resources in service of the task. And the vast majority of the world's population, still playing the shell game that the oligarchs perfected and abandoned long ago, are about to fall right into their hands, yet again.
Ladies and gentlemen, the battle against climate change is surely the most defining and pivotal challenge of our time. Even in a world full of daunting perils and crises, it is hard to imagine anything that poses a greater challenge and opportunity for humanity.
The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident.
The science is unequivocally true, and that there is a price to carbon in their future.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Because where we are, there's nothing else.
We have to start spending money, fast on the solutions that we have in hand to try and help these countries which are already seeing the effects of climate change today and seeing the effects of our consumption, basically.
David Rothschild, thank you so much for joining us here on Bloomberg.
Down in Pennsylvania, there is plenty wine. Say petroleum, petroleum, we must all have some.
So, the general plan at the end of it all, in a way, is to kind of cull us all down a little bit, because the way they see it, there's too many of us. Now, I don't know whether any of you noticed in that clip with Prince Philip, did anyone notice something that he said that should have resonated with what should resonate with us?
He was talking about climate change, wasn't he?
It was, but did you notice one of the comments he made right at the end? He said, that's how it is from where we are.
Not us, from
where we are, where he is. Now when you look at Prince Philip and the group that he surrounds himself, and you look at this from his world, from his leader friends that are all responsible for taking control of the planet for their better purposes, yeah? When you look at it from that point of view, that comment, it has a horrible ring to it. Because to me, there's people out there at the top that believe they know better, and they're arrogant and psychopathic or sociopathic enough to carry that through and not feel any guilt about wiping out millions of people. And they're doing it as we speak on a slow basis. Through cloud seeding, through water contamination, fluoride in water. So I mean, luckily we're in an area where we're not in a fluoridated area. They don't fluoridate our water. Wales is heavily fluoridated, and I know that they've got.
It's chlorinated.
Well, Gordon will tell you a lot more about Wales. Poor Wales. They're.
Oh, not only. I'm talking about your filtration systems in your water supply that everybody gets. You wouldn't know, but I'll try and.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it'll go on to even more. The fluoride that they do, the synthetic fluoride that they do add to our water is hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is it's a byproduct, a mining byproduct that they can't get rid of, a poisonous mining byproduct that they can't get rid of, and the only way to get rid of it is hydrogenate it and turn it into hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a synthetic fluoride, and then that's chucked in our water. Because when it's mixed like that, it's no longer classed as a hazardous, poisonous substance. Even though when you look at toothpaste, you have a pea-sized amount. Any more, it says go to your doctor, yeah, and seek medical advice. Fluoride in big amounts is a poison to us. So the toothpaste that we have, with the unregulated amounts of fluoride in our water, because we can't control the amounts, but the way they do it, there's no way of controlling how much is going in where. So you're just not aware of the fluoride you're taking in. Hence why I like to drink bottled water or boiled water. I tend to try and filter mine as much as I can, because
can you get reverse osmosis? Say
that again.
Can you use a reverse osmosis?
Nah. Who said yes then? They are. There's a person that sorts of reverse osmosis. You've gone over my head there already. I would. Like I say, I've just started finding out about the water side of things and how bad it actually is, and how contaminated it is. I mean, you look at the food chain now. You've got fish. They're doing scientific tests on fish in Canada. Now, Fukushima has leaked that much radiation into the sea that the fish are radioactive, all the way through to Canada. This is the salmon, the tuna that we're eating. Yeah. That's all in our water. That's going into our bodies. I won't even get started on packaged food and processed food, the steroids that they pump into it. I mean, there's steroids that they're pumping into these chickens and cows and stuff to get the most meat out of them. That's going into us. Good, yeah. Well, the better thing is to try and grow your own. Yeah, try and become a little bit more self-sufficient and come away from packaged, preserved foods. Cancer's on the rise, and there's got to be a reason for it. So, put two and two together. Realise from what I've shown you that the businesses that are around in our society today, the only big businesses that get to the top are the ones that are ruthless and that show psychopathic traits. They are psychopathic companies because they're treading on everyone. They haven't got a conscience. They feel no remorse for the things they do. I'm going to show. In fact, I've just missed something. I've got to show you one more thing and this proves to you. This will prove without a doubt that our medical system is willing to kill us for profit. But this, I've got to show you this one because it's quite shocking. Oh, the site is not secure.
Click it on.
Ah, yeah, carry on.
Yeah. Big Brother's watching.
Oh, okay, right, it won't come up. I'll explain it anyway because I know the story quite well. Bayer, which are a pharmaceutical company, they found out that their product they had was contaminated with AIDS. It was a medicine for haemophiliacs, mainly given to children. And they found that it was contaminated with AIDS. These, I think they were probably blood sacs, I assume, or some kind of medical sacs that had got contaminated in one way or another. Now, this was all documented, they knew about it, they were sending emails to each other, they was talking about the fact that what are we going to do with this product, because they've got millions of pounds worth of this medicine that they made that was contaminated. Now, instead of doing the right thing and dumping it, they decided they had to make a profit off it. So they dumped it in Spain, France and China. And they gave it to their medical industry to use. And it infected, I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but to say it was given to, and it was given to children, it was mainly for haemophiliac children, and it infected hundreds of them with AIDS. I can't think of the exact figure, I'm not going to put a figure on it because one's bad enough.
And hepatitis.
And hepatitis as well on top of that. So if, to do that, to sell that, to knowingly sell a product that's going to kill children, yeah, you've got to think then that company is a psychopath. You can't think of it any other way. They've got to be, because they don't care. They've lost all care for you. They want profit. They don't want your health. All right. So when you're looking into medicines and health, when you go to the dentist and he gives you a bit of advice, question it. Ask questions, because they're taking the party line on things. The dentist advised my daughter to drink diet fizzy drinks like Diet Coke. So I came back to him and I said, "What is that? The Diet Coke that's just been linked to strokes in people?" And that's right, because it's got aspartame in it, which is a
using rat poison as well.
It's used as it's a synthetic sugar. It's a synthetic sweetener, and aspartame. There you go. From a nurse. And my dentist advised me to give that to my daughter. So I told him off. I told him it wasn't very good advice to be given. Not because I know the facts. I said to him because the information's out there. And if it's there, it needs to be looked at and confirmed before you're giving me that advice. Because if that information's out there and it's contradictory to what he's been told, it needs to be looked at, doesn't it? And he should have an interest in doing that. I then went on to ask him about natural toothpaste without fluoride in it. He wasn't aware of any other product without fluoride in it. I said, well, I'm concerned about the amount of fluoride I'm taking in. I asked him what the maximum amount of fluoride was allowed to be on a daily basis. He didn't even know. He couldn't even tell me. He had no clue.
They've been trained to be like that.
They just, unfortunately, I can't go at him too much because, like you say, he's getting his advice off an NHF database. And that's it. And that's all it's filtering down. Because all he's taught nowadays is literally fillings, root canals, the practical side of the job.
But he's getting a commission. He's getting a commission, as is a doctor, when they make a recommendation for a certain medicine.
Oh, wow.
And that's how they end up.
So they're getting a cut out of what they're recommending as well?
Obviously, when you get your supplier, your salesman, that goes to your surgery to speak to the doctor, they then give them an incentive to use and promote that product. It's no different to anything in salesmanship. They're all doing it.
It's just turned into a business of profit then.
It's all corporate. Yeah. That's it, in a nutshell.
So we've corporatised all we're slowly corporatising, and it's almost been done now. Every aspect of our life where it's just driven to profit.
I don't know
Nothing
anything that
to
isn't
do.
corporate now. I think everything's corporate now.
It seems to be. It seems to.
Well,
It
even
does
the
seem
United
to be
Kingdom
that
is a
way.
corporation, isn't it?
You can find it on what's the business page that you look at to see companies? Companies House.
Well, I use 4 search engines to make sure I've got the right facts.
In fact, I'm going to leave this part to Gordon because I won't do it justice and I know Gordon will. I'm going to wrap up there. Thanks for listening to me waffle on.
Yeah.
I've had my bit now. I've had my rant. I'll leave it to the experts. And go and grab a drink, have a fag, come back. I'm going to introduce you to Gordon. Fantastic bloke. I've listened to him a couple of speeches so far. And, I won't do it because he is still the problem, apparently. For today, we're not the problem. But thanks very much. Go and get a drink, have a cigarette. We're back in 10 minutes and we'll crack on. All right.
Tell me, is there just a way I can connect this to my... That's it.
Yeah, we got to.